Good morning. It's 8:20 a.m. on the 28th of December. It is a Saturday, and just when I'm here, I want to show you. This is a painting I did of our house, our traditional family home, and it's not too bad. It's a watercolor. It's a fair enough representation. I mean, anyone that knew the house would identify that a long, long way away. And anyway, but the point to be made about it is that if you look here, there's a steps going up to a loft. This here was the dairy. That's where the milk and all the cool, there was a cold room. There was no entry to that from the back or anything like that. No windows. It was a cold room. And this was a loft, but there was steps up to the loft. And this was the habitable part of the house. But this room was under the loft, but it was for the hired boy. There was always a room separate to the house proper for the hired staff. They usually slept in what was a semi-loft, a room done up for that purpose. The hired people did not sleep in the house generally. Now, I presume if there were females, they might have, but there was enough space up here, and there was the stairs. Now, my father married into this place in 1937 due to a series of tragic deaths of the people, my mother's people before them. The boy died of meningitis, and there was a lot of tragic deaths. And my father ended up coming down with my mother, the youngest of them, and living here with the grandparents. But key to this was this room, and as you can see, there's steps up here. You just don't see the steps too good, but there's steps. So you can sit there on a summer's day and look in that window and talk to someone in there. But up the road a bit, there was a neighbouring house, Hans, and there was a chap there. He was a nephew. Now his mother they were good people, good farming people, but the father was a bit comical, and they went to Scotland, and he was born in Scotland, the only son, and he was always slightly comical. And when you be going to school, people would say, "How's he doing?" and all this, and there was always fun with him, and he could be wound up in the town and told stories, and he'd attack people, and he could beat you on the street and tell you, "Oh, I heard what happened. Yeah, I know all about you." You'd say, "Yeah," but then you see, you'd get used to him, and you'd say, "Who told you?" You see, you wouldn't deny. And he was full of this stuff, believing this, that, and the other. And he never really seemed to cop on. And he'd go into that Gartland's pub in Kingscourt, and Jim Gartland, he's now passed on, would wind him up worse. And there'd be great fun with him. But there was a man, now this man I'm telling you about, Eugene, was a nephew and also the working boy in Hands up the road. And he inherited the place eventually. So what happened then was, in our house, there was a man here called John. You see, there was a man here called John. And he was from a working farming background, farm labouring background, but he was a good chat to talk and good company like, and he'd take a bottle of stout, but not too much, and he'd do a bit of gambling. And he used to say in Dangers, and he'd meet me in the town when I was young. "Oh, young Martin, I was hired in your house," and all this. And he was in there, but he would be plenty of crack with him. And he was the fella that my father put this, when he bought new boots, he put the filling in the boots back up into the toes, and he went back into the shop to say they were too small for him. So my father was a trickster, a big time trickster, and when he'd be in the company of ordinary people, he'd always be at it. And even throughout my life, if I can play tricks, I will always do it. I get fierce kicks out of it. It might be something abnormal, but nobody's really hurt. And I was often in very fancy company, and it'd always be winding them up or doing something or tying something or telling them I had their place bugged or whatever. There's never a dull moment when you're playing tricks on people. But we never really, even my old grandmother, she'd be asleep down here in the bed. She was in her 90s. And I'd put slip a little piece of a thread on her big toe when I'd be tucking her in at 4 o'clock in the evening, and I'd throw it out the window, and then when she'd be asleep, I'd pull the thread, and she'd feel this thing to her toe, and after a while she discovered it was me. This sort of tricking was going on everywhere, but it was generally harmless, but sometimes it could be misinterpreted by idiots, and when you could be working in a place and they'd tell you somebody urinated in your bottle of milk and you wouldn't be able to drink it. Like, there was an ugly side to it too, but my father wouldn't do anything like that. There was always everyone knew what the proper standard was. So anyway, they were above it. Didn't Mrs. Hand die? And John, the hired boy here, he lived about 4 miles away. He was born. And Eugene, who was now living in the Hand's house, two comical boys, two characters, and they were up at the wake, and so there was bottles of stout and pipes of tobacco and everything, and a bit of crack and everything, and terrible chat, and a good crowd came to the wake. And when it came to about 12 o'clock at night, my father was up at it. He went up with John, with John, and he went up with him, and they were up there, not a bottle of stout, and Eugene was living there. Then that somebody wanted to stay there for the night, and they didn't want Eugene because he was a hardy fella. He wasn't really what they wanted. They wanted his bed to give to some lady who was connected. So my father says, well, wonder could we organise something down in our house, you see? Could Eugene come down with John? Now, don't forget, in case I'm confusing you, John was the hired boy, and that was his room. Eugene was hired boy and going to inherit the farm up the road. Both of them were at the wake. But Eugene was surplus. He was going to take up a bed, and they wanted him to go somewhere. And it was agreed he'd come down to our place. And there was a big double bed there, a big iron double bed. I think it's out in the sheds yet. So Daddy says, my father says, well, I'll go down and organise that. Tell his wife, my mother, and tell them, yes, they're coming, and there'll be a cup of tea. We'll go down now, and that let the boys stay above another wee while. And the minute my father got out of the house above, he ran down the lane, and he got the bed here, and he put a piece of wood under each of the casters of the bed, and it'd be kind of a make-up floor. I remember the concrete floor going into it, so it must have been a kind of a stone and a kind of a clay floor, I'd say. I'm not sure, or maybe lime and sand. I think that's what it was. But he insulated the bed, and he used to have old tin wire used in the mines and the gypsum. It was yellow wire, and it was used for detonating the mines, the explosives, and it was tin stuff. It had an iron core in it, not copper. And he ran it in through the window here and down here, and there was a coil of a car. The old cars had a coil that used to vibrate the whole way down. They thought that the charge in the cylinder needed a constant spark the whole way down, but in fact that wasn't the case. There was a wee tapper on the side of them. I'll show you one sometime when I get a chance. But in any event, he wired up the bed, and he had the earth wire of the house here, so he was able to run the earth across, maybe to the earth wire here, and maybe there was no electricity that time. In actual fact, I think there was no electricity there, because we got the electricity in 1952. I think it was before that. It was maybe 1947 or something. But anyway, he wired up the bed using the coil and put a good earth down. So the next thing, the boys come talking down the lane, chatting away and smoking cigarettes, and in they went anyway, and up to the room. And that time there was nothing thought of two men sleeping on the one bed. This thing of it being something homosexual didn't exist at that time. And if you look at Laurel and Hardy films, Laurel and Hardy sleep in the one bed. You'll see that regular, especially if they're somewhere they're staying. Sure, Father Ted, kind of the same idea, that not all men who associate together were homosexual. That's just a modern thing. But Daddy wired up the bed anyway, and the two boys went down, and they stripped off the trousers, and they had a big long shirt with a detachable collar, and they knelt down to say a few prayers. It was always the thing to say a few prayers. And when John went to get up, there was a brass ball on the end of the bed, and he put his hand on it, and when he did, Daddy pushed the button and gave him a shock. And, he let a roar out of him. "What's wrong with you?" says the other fella, says Eugene. "It's electric." So John went to get up, and he put his hand on the thing again, and he got lifted again. There is a shock in it. And then Eugene held it, and there was no shock. So my father was shocking John, but not shocking Eugene. So Eugene thought John was gone nuts. He could find no shock. He was feeling it, putting his hand. There's nothing. So this went on for a while, and Johnny wouldn't get up, and he eventually managed to get up. He was afraid of the bed. The bed was alive, and he put his finger over again. And my father gave him a shock, and then Eugene touched it, There's nothing. You're mad, he says, you see. So after a while with this going on, they wouldn't get into the bed. So this was my father outside and the tears running down his cheeks with laughing. This was the fun we'd be having. So I was not born. I was not born. So eventually my father lost the run himself and he gave Eugene a tip of it as well. And Eugene got a shock, and then they'd walk straight out and up the stairs to where my granny and my mother was up there, and they knocked on the doors. We're not going to bed. Where's PJ? And they thought PJ was gone to bed. Is he in there? Is he? No, he's not here. He didn't come up yet. And then they began to realise that he was electrocuting them from the window. Now, this the reason I show you the picture is you can see how easy it was to do it. You could sit here and you could put your contraptions here and work it in through the window. So that said they wouldn't go to bed. They wouldn't go to bed till PJ was found. And they went down to the kitchen, and I think somebody made them a cup of tea or something, and eventually PJ tried to nip up the stairs and make out he was coming down from upstairs, but the boys knew he wasn't up there, and he came down, what's wrong, which is, what's wrong, and you get up them stairs, we're not going near that bed till you get up. So that actually did happen. That was the type of thing my father would do. And anyone that knew him in the area around Kingsford knew that he'd be doing this. They'd be stealing his tools up on the jip or taking lens of spanners, and he'd have an electric wire that when you'd lift it, it'd lift you out of it. So he was always at this kind of crack. So that just shows you the context in which this actually did happen. Around 1948, I'd say, when he wired up the bed using the coil of a car. And sometime I'll show you what that coil looks like. It wasn't just a single spark. It sparked right down the piston. As the piston went down, you got a second spark. The idea was if the first one didn't light the charge, well, the second one usually did. They became obsolete with modern cars. So anyway, that's the story for you about the two boys. They ran up the stairs. They wouldn't go to bed in the bed until my father was found and accounted for, and he couldn't electrocute them anymore. And the key to him was how he'd only electrocute one of them, making the other one think that the other fellow was mad. You see, how come he's not getting a shock? This was the psychology of the tricks that would be played, and this was everywhere and every place long ago, and particularly in my family on my father's side. This was part of the entertainment and the fun that they got out of living, and it was very, very wholesome and very, very good. We'll see you back for something else. Comment underneath. That's the story of the electric shock on the bed. A big iron bed, of course. Good luck. We'll see you back. Thank you.